special purpose missions were vital to survive. The heroism displayed by the search and rescue crews known as SAR were legendary and saved countless lives of those shot down behind enemy lines. Meet James Lloyd, call sign Zeke, who can attest to this legacy.
After a 4-year ceasefire, which started in 1968 above the 20th parallel, North Vietnam, with the aid of China and the Soviet Union, were well prepared and waiting for us. In the 10.5 months that followed, we lost 15 fixed-wing aircraft, which consisted of a third of our A-7s. And like most pilots flying combat missions, I convinced myself that the events that led to the losses of others weren't going to happen to me. But on the evening of August 6th, I was to learn otherwise. Lieutenant Commander Art Bell, our admin officer, and I were assigned to seek out and destroy a large truck convoy that was reported early in the evening up in the Vinh Son area heading south. The sun had set and it was dark by the time we crossed the beaches. And little did I know at that time that dark sky was going to play an extremely important role and be a strong ally of mine for the hours that followed. It wasn't long we found our target. I rolled in a 45-degree dive delivery that dropped 2 Mark 82 500-pound bombs on the truck movement. They were, what they looked like from the air was just a fine, thin line of muted headlights. Pulled off, rolled over, inverted to evaluate my hits when I got an indication in my cockpit that I was being painted by a Fansong radar, and seconds later, it gave me an indication that a SAM missile had launched. I looked off about 10-12 miles away, and I could see the fireball of the infamous Soviet-built SA-2 surface-to-air missile approaching 3 times the speed of sound. And our defenses in those days, one of the biggest one is a SAM break. Avoid it. Try to make it stall out, or at least it can't turn with you. Now at night, you have poor depth perception. So if I turned too soon, it would be able to track me. If I waited too late, I'd get caught up in the 500-foot kill pattern. So when I saw the dark center of the nose cone and the fireball, I rolled over and did what we call a split S, pulled down to avoid it. It screamed by me, missing me. But what I didn't know, a second SAM had been launched, went up behind me, blew my left wing off. I was in a steep dive. I don't remember much about the ejection other than the fact when I pulled the D-ring between my legs, the alternate handle, I saw the 2,000 feet screaming through the altimeter, then the red lights of the instrument panel pulled away. Second 2 later, the plane blew up on impact. I shot horizontally, swung twice in the chute, and hit the rice paddies. I don't remember getting out of my equipment, my seat, or my parachute, or my helmet. I just remember running to get away from the fireball because the 20 millimeter was cooking off and I didn't want to be around when the 500-pounders went off. Plus, the light of the fire was giving me away. Instantly, people came streaming out of the villages, screaming, yelling. And I went, I don't know, a few hundred yards, got behind a little clump about 3 feet high of razor grass, sat in that and kind of tried to evaluate the situation. I was basically in shock. One minute I'm flying an airplane, familiar cockpit, comfort of the cockpit. Seconds later, I'm in the enemy's backyard. I was 150 miles north of the DMZ, 21 miles in from the coast, in an area I was told by a commanding officer no Americans would ever see again in 10 years. I put mud on my hands and my face to cut down my skin tones and also to hold off the hordes of mosquitoes. And the villagers literally came up within 6 feet of me and didn't see me. After I calmed down a bit, I pulled out one of my survival radios and called Art, who was overhead, and told him I was alive. And he told me that Lieutenant Commander Bernie Smith, our ops officer, who was another outstanding pilot, was coming in to help him out. And then I could hear Bernie talk on the radio, calling me, and when I called back, he couldn't hear me. He just heard static. So he said, "Jim, click me in. 1 right, 2 left," which I did. He came in low, fast, with his lights on, and that's when I realized that everybody around me was armed. Everybody was shooting at that airplane. When he was overhead, "Now turn your damn lights off. I don't want company down here," which he did. And we didn't have GPS. We didn't have night goggles. It was a lot of luck. He told me that a helicopter was on its way in. I looked around, and with all the enemy right around me, and as much as I wanted to get out of there, I told them, turn the helicopter back. It's too hot. A slow mover won't make it. I asked for some bombs to be dropped on the other side of the rice paddies. My thinking was they think I was over in the other part of the rice paddy. Well, I'd seen bombs going off for months, obviously, every day. That was the day at the office for us anyway. But I had no idea how devastating they were on the ground. The shock wave and the sound was devastating. But worse yet was the light of the bombs. It lit me up, it lit everybody up around me. I could see literally 100 people, if not more, all around me. I told them to knock it off, that's not gonna work. I'm gonna have to move. And I was a little nervous of leaving that little clump of grass. I felt secure there, but I have to emphasize, I had to get out by daylight. I got out of that little clump of grass, and there was for about 40 minutes, I've been watching 11 North Vietnamese about 40 yards from me, and they would talk loudly. I knew there were 11 because I named each one of them a number, so I keep track of them, because I don't want to get on the radio with one or two standing near me. So I got up out of that, started to move away from that clump of grass, putting their voices behind me, and when they faded to silence, I took off running. I probably went about 1/8 of a mile, got down to call the radio, call in to tell them I'm on the move, that I was heading north only because seemed to be quieter, when I realized I lost both radios. No radio, no rescue. So as hard as it was, I turned back. I worked my way back. There was clumps of grasses all over the place. I didn't know which one I had to go into. Then I used the voices of those 11 men and vectored myself into the exact clump of grass that I was hiding in. I couldn't see, I just groped around, and I found the PRC-90 radio, and the strongest of the two, and it never left my right hand the rest of the night. I retreated a second time and got going, checked in, whatever. I'd be crossing rice paddies, I'd be sliding and falling in the mud, slimy stuff, making all kinds of noise. So I got off on the partitions between the rice paddies and started moving, and I was making good time. So I kept on going, and I'd be going across rice paddies, and there'd be a whole string of North Vietnamese all lined up like a rabbit hunt, beating pans, yelling. I thought I'd heard my name being called, and I didn't know if it was actually my name or a Vietnamese word that sounded like it, because the guys overhead were talking to me. They were my friends, so they were not using my call sign, they were using my name. After about 4 or 5 hours, which almost seemed like eternity, I traveled about, I found out later, exactly 2 miles from where I landed. It was an open field, fairly quiet. So I pulled out my radio and I said, this is probably the best it's gonna get. You go ahead and bring the helicopter in a second time. The A6 that was overhead, it was a commanding officer of our A6 squadron, and his bombardier navigator, Lieutenant Commander Grady Jackson, took over on-scene command. The two A7s had flown over 5 hours, which is a tremendous amount of time for a single seat. In-flight refueled 2 or 3 times, were relieved by Commander Ernst. The planes started stacking up overhead, and that brought in the North Vietnamese. And I thought that's gonna be a race to see who's gonna get to me first. And the skipper, Commander McCracken of the Helicopter Rescue Squadron, went and personally visited Admiral Rasmussen, who was the commander of Task Force 77, and convinced him that his people could do it. And then when he gave the green light, I was told the air war in Vietnam stopped for one thing and one thing only, and that was to get an A7 pilot out that got in a lot of trouble. An HH-3A helicopter, a Sea King, had been airborne most of the night. One of the other helicopters was Commander McCracken. When he got done with the Admiral, he jumped into the helicopter, and there was 3 of them. And they just took turns refueling on the destroyers and then going back in, up to the coast, waiting for the call in. They did that all night. Well, when I called in, Big Mother 60 was sent in. It was flown by Harry Zinser and Bill Young. And they came in, and when they got in my vicinity, the planes overhead said, Jim, take over vectors. And I could see him coming with all his lights on, and everybody was shooting at him. I got up and ran up and jumped up and down, waved my arms, giving myself away to the North Vietnamese to get his attention, and I was bathed in the floodlight of his landing light. He flew over and disappeared. Everybody, the plane saw me, the North Vietnamese saw me. At the time, the helicopter did not. So I was managed to turn him around with the help of the planes overhead and get back over, and he says, turn on a light, any kind of light. Well, before I could do anything, pencil flares that we carried popped up all around. It confirmed the fact they'd been listening on the radios all night. He said, which one's you? And I said, negative, none of them. Disregard, I'm turning my strobe on, don't shoot, don't shoot, don't shoot. Well, the strobes all around went off at the same time. Well, he went into a hover a couple, maybe 100 yards away, and I just took off at a dead run. I couldn't see him because I was still lost my night vision, but it sounded like the whole North Vietnamese army was closing in on me. They were right behind me. Ran up to the helicopter, it was hovering there, his cable was down, I hooked on. I had my helmet on, so the noise was devastating. Rocks, mud, flying around, and I closed my eyes and waited to be hauled up. Nothing. Looked up, and the helicopter was sitting right next to me in the mud. He had landed to get below a deflection angle of a AAA gun, a 37 millimeter that was trying to shoot him. And so he got below the deflection angle, and we had a few seconds, and a few seconds only, for me to get on board before they got the gun lowered. And Doug Ankney, and the gunner reached over his gun. I'll never forget the look of his face and his outstretched hand, and him yelling, come on, come on. And he grabs the back of my flight suit and pulls me in. Meantime, when we landed, the North Vietnamese thought they shot it down because he landed and they turned the lights off. So they stormed the helicopter. Matt Szymanski on the other side, years later, said he was laying them down like cordwood. And right before we got to the coast, which seemed like forever, 2 missiles went right by the helicopter, probably 50 feet. And we figured they were, at the time, the newer shoulder-mounted heat seekers that would go after slow movers. We avoided those, and then the gunner grabbed my shoulder and pointed down out the open door, and you could see the breakers. We were feet wet. The savior of a Navy pilot.
Please like and share if you find the video content interesting. Don't forget to subscribe to the channel and comment below so as not to miss new upcoming videos. And see the entire film, Legends of Carrier Aviation, now streaming on Amazon and Tubi TV.